Hello, and welcome to another episode of Why Relationships Matter in the Innovation Economy. I'm Casey, and this is a Goody Nation podcast. For those of you who don't know, Goody Nation is an organization that exists to help bridge the relationship gap for so many deserving founders. These are folks in the social entrepreneurship space, folks who may not always have opportunities to make the connections to the things that may help them to advance their careers and their businesses. And so the reason that we do this podcast is to just illustrate the importance of relationship building in the innovation economy and exactly how and why our focus on relationship building impacts some of the dope people who are in our world. And so today we have a very special guest, one of our Goody Nation board members. We have Jeff Hilimire. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course. And so, Jeff, classic Goody Nation question to start us off with. What is your origin story?
Oh, nice. Okay. Well, thanks for having me. I've been such a fan of Goody Nation for so long and was honored to join the board just recently here. So I'm excited to get my hands in and see if I can help out. Yeah. So I guess my entrepreneurship journey started in college. My college roommate and I, way back a long, long time ago, began building websites when the internet was new, if you can believe that. And we just were building websites 24/7 in the dorm room and decided, hey, let's start a company and see if anybody would want to pay us to do this. And so we built that company for 10 years, got it to about 75 employees, sold it to private equity. That company was called Spun Logic, which you can see. I have the sign that was on our building behind me. And then we stayed at the private equity firm, which bought my company and two others, merged them together. We had about 350 people. I stayed as president of that company. We sold that 5 years later. And then since then, I've been on a journey to build what I call purpose-driven businesses. Businesses that are a force for good, that treat their employees the right way, and that really try to infuse a true purpose into the business. I've written 4 books on this topic. The 5th one's coming out later this year. I've also started several nonprofits. And so I've just tried to figure out how I can have an outsized positive impact on the world. And mostly I do that through business.
Amazing. So just out of curiosity, you said it was like your college roommate and yourself who kind of started your entrepreneurial journey. What school did you attend?
We went to UNC Charlotte up in North Carolina.
Fantastic. Yes. In case we have any UNC folks listening who want to be like, oh yeah, that's our alum. So you mentioned that you have a focus on purpose-driven businesses. Could you talk to us a little bit more about what that means to you? What is a purpose-driven business?
Yeah, and it's a term that's completely overused today. You know, it really bothers me how often companies will say they're purpose-driven, and then when you sort of dive in, there's no purpose really there. So what I've tried to do is build what I call the purpose playbook, which is 3 components. The first is building a trusting leadership team. So I'm a big fan of like Patrick Lencioni and the 5 dysfunctions of a team and the work that he's done there. So we really feel like in order to effectively build any kind of sustainable culture, especially one that's driven by purpose, you have to have a leadership team that's in sync and trusts each other. So that's phase 1. Phase 2 is what I call purpose, vision, tenets, and values, PVTV. And that's mostly what I've written my books about, is how to develop your team or company's purpose, vision, tenets, and values. And it all starts with an authentic purpose that comes from the team members. And then the third component is it's called the great game of business, but it's basically open book management, which allows you to operationalize your purpose. So that's one thing that I find, that there's some companies that do a good job establishing their purpose. But oftentimes it sort of falls off over time. And so I've worked hard on how do you execute against this purpose over time? How do you continue it along your journey? Because that's really where the magic happens, but it's also the hardest part of it. So yeah, I work with companies to try to help them unearth what's that authentic purpose to them. What are they excited about? Why does this business exist beyond just to reward shareholders? And that's a really fun process.
So I'm curious, what led you to this path? Were there any particular mentors or colleagues that you sort of you met and you knew and you were like, I kind of want to emulate that, or you know what, they just sparked this new thought and I want to keep going down this path. Is there anyone in particular who you can think of?
Yeah. So we'll go a little deep here if that's okay. Okay, good. So, yes, after we sold the second business, uh, I was sort of, let's see, I was like 32, 33 years old, and I had built and sold two businesses effectively. I was on some of the more prestigious boards in Atlanta. I'd won all the awards you would want to win, fastest growing this, youngest CEO, all these things. And yet I was very unfulfilled, and I didn't know why. And I think, I had been just chasing what everyone else's expectations of success are. And so I expressed this to the mentor of all mentors for me, Ken Bernhardt, who's always been there for me. And he said, you need to go through Leadership Atlanta. And I had heard of Leadership Atlanta. It's been around for a long, long time. I think it's the longest running business leadership program in the country. But I knew of it as, this prestigious thing that if you get in, that's another check on your list of accomplishments, but I didn't really understand the benefits. He did. So I went through Leadership Atlanta in 2012, 2013, and it changed my life forever. There's a race awareness weekend that happens early on in your process. There's 80 people in a class, and they intentionally diversify that class. There's 40 men, 40 women, 40 people of color, 40 white people, and all sorts of leaders from Atlanta, including Raphael Warnock, who was in my class and who I'm friends with now because of that experience. So there's all sorts of different folks in there. And one of the first things you do is you go through a 2-day race awareness weekend. And I had not, somehow growing up in the South, I had not really had many real conversations about race, which I now realize is, a direct, sort of view into the privilege that I have, that I never had to have conversations about race. So fast forwarding that moment and that 2-day period, my eyes started to open, and I started to really dive into all the different ways that I have privilege as a human being. I have basically every check mark you could want to have, and it's not fair and it's not right. And so I worked hard to find my personal purpose in order to try to do as much good as possible, because I knew that I was benefiting from an unfair system. And so I landed on my purpose being to have an outsized positive impact on the world. And I felt like it needed to be outsized because my skill set is to build and grow things and to bring people along. And everything I needed to do should be positive because I'm, sucking up resources. So that led me to start some nonprofits, but it also led me to believe that business should be a place where we could impact people's lives. And, if you think about, Dr. King always said that the most diversified and segregated hour in Atlanta or in America was 11 o'clock on Sunday morning. And his point being that churches aren't doing much to bring people together. And I would add politics divides people, government, people don't trust, nonprofits are underfunded. To me, the last real opportunity for us to bring people together with different views and build empathy is business. You look at business and it should be more diversified. And certainly DE&I is something that we're focused on, but you have an opportunity to be with a lot of different people and change people's minds. And so for me, business being a force for good and me leaning into that really led me to say that a business that stands for something more than itself and that has a purpose to do good in the world is where I think I can make the most impact. And so I've built multiple businesses that are purpose driven. And now Purpose Group is the company that I run full time. And it's a holding company where we buy businesses, small businesses, we help them find their purpose and then let them continue to grow. And so that's sort of, I look back, and if Ken, my mentor, hadn't suggested that to me, and he knows me so well that he knew that's exactly what I needed, my life would be totally different. And so now I'm on this journey that I think I'll be on until I'm not on this planet anymore. And it all comes from his understanding of me and him listening to me and giving me the advice that I needed.
I see that's amazing for so many reasons. First of all, shout out to Ken, shout out to Leadership Atlanta. One of the flagship programs in Goody Nation is a program called All Founders Need Therapy. And this program was started not necessarily, encouraging people to go and find a professional therapist. It was a couple founders who met up at a bar because they just needed to talk. They just needed to get something out. And so, what you just said just really demonstrates how relationship building can sometimes be as informal as I'm going through, even if it's like I'm going through a lot of success, but I don't know how to process that success. I just need to come talk to somebody about it, how that can be a stepping stone to like finding your purpose. That's kind of like wild. So speaking of like finding stepping stones in the Atlanta innovation economy, I say this anecdotally, but there's somebody who probably has the numbers behind it. It seems like in some way, all roads lead to Joey Womack. And at some point, you're gonna end up in a room having a conversation with Joey. And so I'm curious, as one of our newest board members, how did you end up becoming a part of Goody Nation?
Joey is somebody that just oozes authenticity. He is trying to make a difference in this world, and has chosen a very tough path and is fighting the good fight and has been doing it for so long. You can't be in tech in Atlanta and not bump into Joey. And the things that I value in people are all the things that he has. And so I have been a supporter on the side for a long time of Goody Nation and Joey. And I have expressed to him that, look, if and when the time is right, I would be excited to try to join the board. I think this particular mission and the things that you all are doing on the Goody Nation team really speak to the things that, I want to be making an impact on. And so I was honestly just waiting for the chance to be asked to join for a little while. And so hopefully I can make an impact and do some good. But honestly, I'm just a massive fan that's excited to be on the team.
Amazing. And so you mentioned that you've been on other boards in Atlanta. You've been a part of other boards. I'm curious from a relationship standpoint. There may be some folks listening who are there at the point where they're like, you know what, I too would like to join a board someday. And, maybe they're not entirely sure what that type of commitment means or how being involved with an organization, how that will impact the organization and themselves. So do you have any advice for anyone who's listening who's like, oh, I know an org that I admire. How should I approach being a board member?
I'm so glad you asked that question because it's a main piece of advice I give to entrepreneurs in Atlanta specifically. Is one of the best ways to combine multiple things that you need to do. One of which is to grow your network and become more well known in order to grow your business and make those key relationships and meet new customers, but also to be able to use your superpowers, your skills for good. And so when you combine those two things, joining a nonprofit board is a great way to do that. And I've been on boards as my passions have, changed over time. Started off with more, I was on the Children's Museum board, the zoo board, junior achievement. These were all things that as I had young kids, I was passionate about. Now more of the boards and nonprofits I'm a part of are focused more on social justice and racial equity. And so these are things I'm passionate about. I would say to anybody, like, as I've talked to, especially young entrepreneurs, but really it's like, oh, well, I don't know that they would want me. Atlanta has so many great nonprofits, so many small nonprofits that would just die to have somebody who's in tech or who's an entrepreneur, who has a marketing background. There's so many things that you can bring to the table that all you have to do is look them up. So like, I would say, like, think about things that you're passionate about. There are a dozen or more nonprofits in Atlanta that focus on that thing. Look at their board, ask Joey, ask me, ask anyone you can that, hey, do you know anybody there? Can I get an introduction? They would be thrilled to hear from you. So I think it's one of the best things you can do, but I think most importantly, it's going to make you feel better about yourself because you're giving back some of your time. And one of the things that I've found is when people can use their superpowers to do good, it can create real meaning in your life. So I'm a big fan of looking to help nonprofits, joining boards that match up with your passions, and using that as a way to grow your business.
That's a great piece of advice. And it actually leads me to my final question for you, which is, so many founders, there are a million things to think about: running the company, making payroll, figuring out what, things are going to be looking like from day to day. And then on top of that, there's this, we have to build relationships and network and be in the community. And, it's just, it could be a lot for founders. And so I just want to know if you have any advice for how to better integrate genuine relationship building into everyday practice.
Well, so I typically tell, depending on the business, but typically what I tell entrepreneurs is that to me, growth is the hardest aspect of the business. Finding new customers, continuing to grow existing customers. And the trap that I see a lot of small business owners fall into is, as they build momentum and start to build sales, they take their foot off the gas when it comes to continuing to grow the business, because they're now worried about the customers that they have. And look, being an entrepreneur, there's no shortage of things to do every single day. So like you're going to have a to-do list that you're never going to finish. And I'm very aware of that. But when my first business, SpunLogic, we, for the first 5 years, we got to, I want to say 250,000 in revenue. So each year we'd get a tiny bit bigger. In year 5, I changed the course of what I was focused on as the CEO to being, let's say, 80% growth. And that was a lot of networking. That was maybe, giving speeches or talks if I could. That was, literally going through LinkedIn to see who I could try to get in front of. When I changed that focus, we doubled for the next 5 years to get to 9 million in revenue over a 5-year period. It was almost entirely because now our organization was focused on growth and didn't take our foot off the pedal. So one of the things I tell, as I've mentioned, the nonprofit, joining a nonprofit is advice I give to leaders. Another thing I say is, I would like you to get to a cadence of a certain number of meetings a week, and never stop doing that. Depending on the business, I've told people 15 meetings a week, and never stop. And if you do that and build that muscle, what you'll find is that you start to rapidly expand your network, and you'll get to a point where you have potentially too much work. And that's where it's important to keep doing it. Build your team around you to catch that work, to deliver, but don't take your foot off the gas. So, for some it's 15 a month, for some it's 5 a week. But if you get into that cadence of continuously networking, you just need to keep doing it. So it's one of the things that I would say, don't put off. Don't say, well, I'll get to that next month. I'll get to that in 3 months, or once I fix this thing. That should be something you're doing all the time, and just get good at it. Build authentic relationships with people. These need to be real conversations where you're getting to know somebody personally, but people like to work with people that they know. I also have found, by the way, my oldest is now in college, and some of my relationships from networking and business helped him get into NYU, in New York. And I never would have thought that would have happened with my network. You might find that your child needs, a certain type of medical help. Your network may help you find the best doctor. So I think your network can do so many things for you, beyond just grow your business, that it's really more of a life skill. And I'm just a big fan of continuing to do that. And you'll see the benefits quickly.
Well, thank you, Jeff, for sharing more about networking as a life skill. I think that's incredibly important for not just business owners, but for everyone to think about and to remember. And so I guess, speaking of which, if someone's listening to this and is like, oh, that really, that spoke to me, I actually would love to reach out. How can people do that?
Yeah. Easiest way is my website, jeffhilimire.com. That'd be, you can find my books, you can find me on LinkedIn, you can find all the stuff there, but that's probably the easiest way to reach out. And I'm happy to have conversations and help where I can.
Amazing. Well, this has been another incredible episode of Why Relationships Matter in the Innovation Economy. We reflected more about networking as a life skill. We talked about finding ways to integrate networking as a part of the overall day-to-day business strategy and not just like, oh, I'll get to it later. All things that are so important for us to remember, whether we're founders, whether we're just going about our day-to-day lives. These are the reasons why relationships matter. And so I want to thank you for tuning in today. And as our Goody Nation founder, Joey Womack, always says, stay magnetic and outwork yesterday. Bye.